Welcome to Chapter 4 in our security textbook, Vulnerability Assessment. Vulnerability assessment is a systematic and methodical evaluation of the exposure of assets to attackers, forces of nature, and any other thing that is potentially harmful. Asset identification is the first step in a vulnerability assessment. You have to determine what needs to be protected. Two of the most common are people, employees, customers, business partners, etc., and physical assets, buildings, automobiles, and other non-computer equipment. The elements of information technology, or IT, are also key assets. This includes data, which is all information used and transmitted by an organization, hardware, which would include all computers, laptops, servers, networking equipment, telecommunication connections, and software, which would include applications, operating systems, and security software. And then, of course, you have to evaluate the threat. After your assets have been inventoried, the next step is to determine the potential threats against the assets that come from threat agents. The goal of threat modeling is to better understand who attackers are, why they attack, and what types of attacks might occur. Threat modeling often constructs scenarios of types of threats that assets can face, such as fires, earthquakes, hackers, cyber terrorists, things like that. And then there has to be some kind of appraisal of that vulnerability. After the assets have been enumerated and the threats have been determined, the next natural question is, what are our current weaknesses that might expose these assets to those threats? Known as vulnerability appraisal, this in effect takes a snapshot of the current security of the organization. Every asset must be viewed in light of each threat. It is not sufficient to limit the assessment to only a few of the obvious threats. Can't speak this morning. Next is risk assessment. A risk assessment involves determining the damages that could result from an attack and the likelihood that the vulnerability is a risk to the organization. Two risk calculation formulas that are commonly used are single loss expectancy, or SLE. That is the expected monetary loss each time a risk occurs. SLE is computed by multiplying the value of the assets by the exposure factor, which is a proportion of the asset's value that is likely to be destroyed by a particular risk. It's expressed as a percentage. And then there is the annualized loss expectancy, or ALE. This is the expected monetary loss that can be expected for an asset due to a risk over a one-year period. It's calculated by multiplying what you just calculated, the SLE, by the annualized rate of occurrence. How many times is this going to happen in a 12-month period? Which is the probability that a risk will occur in a particular year. The final step is to determine what to do about the risk, or risk mitigation. First, an organization could attempt to diminish the risk. The second approach is to transfer the risk by making someone else responsible. This is called insurance for the most part. And the final approach is to simply accept the risk. We're just going to take this risk. Assessment is your first step. So, a baseline is an imaginary line by which an element is measured or compared. In information technology, a baseline is a checklist against which systems can be evaluated and audited for their security posture. Baseline reporting is a comparison of the present state compared to the baseline. Some assessment tools include port scanners. Internet Protocol IP addresses are the primary form of address identification on TCP/IP network and are used to uniquely identify each network device. Protocol analyzers can allow you to view network traffic using a standalone protocol analyzer or a computer that runs a protocol analyzer all the time. Protocol analyzer, also called a sniffer, I believe Wireshark falls into this category, is hardware or software that captures packets to decode and analyze the contents. The strength of protocol of a protocol analyzer is that it places the computer's network interface card into promiscuous mode. That is, the NIC shows all network traffic instead of ignoring packets intended for other devices. Next, you have a vulnerability scanner. Vulnerability scanners are basically a range of products that look for vulnerabilities in network systems and report them to the administrators. You can also set up honeypots or honeynets, which is basically a honeypot is a computer located in an area with limited security and loaded with files that appear to be authentic, yet are actually imitations of the real files. Honeynet is basically just a subnet of several of these computers, which lure people away from your actual network. So, while a vulnerability scan is an automated software search through a system for known security weaknesses, which then creates a report of those exposures, a penetration testing is carried out by a tester, a human, which actually tries to not only find but actually exploit the weaknesses in a system to prove they are weaknesses. Instead of using automated software, penetration testing relies on the skill, knowledge, and cunning of the tester. The end product is also a penetration test report. So, how do you mitigate or deter attacks? Well, first you have to create a security posture. A security posture is an approach, philosophy, or strategy regarding security. Some organizations view security as merely a nuisance. Others, however, see attacks as a serious threat to the health and well-being of the organization and regard security as essential. There are several elements that make up a security posture. These would include initial baseline configuration, continuous security monitoring, and remediation. Another key to mitigating and deterring attacks is the proper configuration of controls. One category of controls is those that can either detect or prevent attacks. An additional control regards what occurs when a normal function is interrupted by a failure. When a device fails or a program aborts, what state should it go into? A firewall device that went into a fail-safe control state would prevent all traffic from entering or exiting, resulting in no traffic coming into the network. It also means that internal devices cannot send traffic out, therefore restricts their access to the internet. If a firewall went into a fail-open state, then all traffic would be allowed, opening the door for unfiltered attacks to enter the system. If a software program abnormally terminates, then a fail-open state could allow an attacker to launch an insecure activity, whereas the fail-safe state would close the program or even stop the entire operating system in order to prevent any malicious activity. Hardening. The purpose of hardening your network is to eliminate as many security risks as possible and to make the system more secure. There are a variety of techniques used to harden system. Types of hardening techniques include protecting accounts with passwords, disabling unnecessary accounts, disabling all unnecessary services, and protecting management interfaces and applications. Reporting. It's important to provide information regarding the events that occur so that action can be taken. This reporting can take the form of alarms or alerts that sound a warning message of if a specific situation is occurring. And remember, keep calm and document everything.